Welcome to Northern Fleet, a game of naval combat in the Norwegian Sea and the Atlantic, set in 1983. What's good about Northern Fleet? Why did I write it, I suppose? What you're going to get for your money if you join the Kickstarter. Key points. It's probably the best researched naval game of that era out there. I've spent an awful long time on the web, in the British National Archives, looking at the available online archives to make sure that the data that supports the game is the best you can get. And by many hours, I mean hundreds of hours. You've got a balance of realism and playability. Now, modern naval combat is complicated. And there's only so much we can do to get away with that. However, within that complexity, I've looked at every single way of simplifying things down. Which means you can actually get a small scenario played within an hour. The larger scenarios can be done in an afternoon. If you're going to play the campaign, that's going to take you days. But the game is mostly about the scenarios. So you and a friend can set up and play a scenario. The introductory one's in an hour. The longer ones in an afternoon, 3 to 4 hours. The Kickstarter and the game is print and play. So you will get a bunch of digital files. That will, of course, make it easier to get it to you after the Kickstarter is finished. And they'll keep the price down. If you don't want to print, then my good friend Rick is sorting out a Vassal module for this, so you can play online without any printing whatsoever. Well, you might want to print the rulebook. And all of this I'm going to launch on Kickstarter in August, probably. That is subject to change. So let's talk a little bit about the research. As I've mentioned, I spent a long time doing this. And I've delved into both the British and American archives to make sure this is the best possible game and the most realistic game you can get. What you've got here is DOAE study number 246, which was done for the British government in the late 70s. And this particular document is the one they used with the full wartime order of battle for the NATO forces in the North Atlantic and the Norwegian Sea. So as you can see on the right there, we've got the breakdown of the 2nd UKSW group with an invincible carrier and some escorts. It's supporting URG Underway Replacement Group. And we've also got the UK and Dutch amphibious group that takes the British commandos and indeed the Dutch commandos to Norway as a reinforcement. So I know exactly what those are made up of. Elsewhere in the document, it also covers the American carrier groups. I mean, that's just one document, and I have literally tens, dozens on my drive, all of which have been consulted. So realism, sort of coming on from the previous. I mean, realism is driven by the research, without a shadow of a doubt. What you can see is part of the order of battle for the campaign. What you've got here is the Norwegians. I spent quite a lot of time with or on Norwegian discussion groups, talking to veterans so I could actually get the Norwegians correct. You might have heard me say that the game was inspired by the Victory Games Fleet Series. And the Victory Game Fleet Series has, what's the best way of putting this? An abbreviated order of battle. This game's got the full order of battle. The Victory Games ignored the Norwegian coastal defences. Yep, every single one here, as you can see from the footnotes. On the right, you've got a little bit of the counter sheet. That's most of the Americans sitting there. And each one of those ships has been rated in detail. There is a database underlying the game, and that database is more extensive than one you might be familiar with. It's more extensive than the Harpoon database. It's got that level of detail behind the ship stats. So what other exciting stuff have we got? Crunchy bits, I've called it. Things that make this game stand out from its competitors, if you like. It's got proper SOSUS rules. Okay. SOSUS, for those people that don't know, is an undersea surveillance system used by NATO to track Soviet submarines. It works by putting, and excuse me for the little techie bit, by putting microphones, if you like, passive sonar sensors, if you prefer, in the deep sound channel. Now, the bit you need to get your head around is deep sound channel. Yeah. So SOSUS isn't a barrier, like some games show it, sort of going from the Norwegian coast up to Iceland, then up to Greenland. They don't work like that. It's a bunch of shore-based stations that have long cables dangling from them into the deep sound channel. And sound in the deep sound channel goes an awful long way, thousands of kilometres, which is what makes SOSUS so good. So in the game, SOSUS extends to pretty much every deep sea hex. Now, if you have a little look at the map on the right-hand side there, you should see Andoya in the middle, and it's got a little icon with a circle and some arcs. That is the Andoya SOSUS station. There are several dotted around the map. One tactical option for the Soviets is to bomb them. Personally, when I play, bombing them is a really good idea, because SOSUS is a really big NATO advantage. Now, Andoya is in a little purple sea hex, and next to it, 5817 is a light blue, and above that, 5816 is a sort of medium blue, and 5717 is dark blue. The dark blue ones are the deep hexes, and that is where SOSUS works. Any dark blue hex. The game's got rules for nukes. Nasty things, nukes, oddly enough. I've looked at the Royal Navy studies on nukes versus ships, so there are realistic outcomes. They're nasty, but they're not that nasty, because ships tend to be quite widely spaced. And the sort of nukes that the Russians or the Soviets have on their anti-shipping missiles are about 300 kilotons, and the burst radius is 3 or 4 kilometers. You can space your ships out wider than that. They're probably more useful for wiping out air bases rather than anti-ship. But in either case, the Soviets have more nukes than NATO, so it's a big Soviet advantage. There's only one nuclear scenario in the game, but it's there if you want to play with it. In the campaign, the players get the choice. We've got coastal defences, as I mentioned. Most games don't bother modelling them, but you can see some little gun turrets in Tromsø and Narvik. Those are the Norwegian coast defences. The Soviets get some missile batteries up north too. The other thing that makes this different to pretty much any naval game I've ever seen is it has some activation rules. You have to roll to get your task groups to do what you want. Now, some people might find that a little odd, but go away and read some of the accounts of, for example, the Falklands War. There's a lovely little book called Battle of the Fjords, which talks about a NATO exercise in 1988. And one of the things that strikes me, and should strike you, is how many false submarine contacts each side is getting, and how much time is spent charging after false contacts. And that's what this dice roll represents. Just because you as the Admiral want somebody to go over up north, they might detect a submarine and go east. Now, we don't move things randomly, they just don't move in terms of the game, because one presumes that once they've gone east and found there's no real submarine, or they've shot a poor whale, then they'll hurry up and go back north again. Yeah. But that helps get rid of the 1,000-foot Admiral issue. Can be a bit frustrating at times, but the activation usually works. So it's a minor irritant if that sort of thing irritates you. I think it's a good way of making the game more realistic and stopping players having total control. And for those that know it, I've just stolen the bloody big battles activation rules. And for those who've played it, know that works really well. Playability. What have we done to make this simpler? So, ammo rules where the ammo rules count. There are no logistic rosters. I hate with a passion logistics rosters. You're not supposed to be filling in paperwork. You're supposed to be playing a game. So we use counters to track ammo, and only where it counts. So things that aren't going to run out, like, I don't know, ASW ammunition, I don't bother counting. Iron bombs, don't bother counting. Things that are likely to run out, like surface-to-surface missiles, those we count. Nukes, we count. ASW, horribly complicated in the real world. I've managed to narrow it down to one detection roll, so quieter submarines are harder to detect, and one opposed combat roll, with a handful of modifiers. Any single ASW combat is really quickly sorted out, especially once you've done a couple and you know the modifiers, which is just as well because the Soviets have an awful lot of submarines. Air-to-air combat is one roll per target counter, but the rolls are all the same, so you can roll them in parallel. Again, each air-to-air combat, once you know the modifiers, dead quick. And for surface-to-surface missiles and air-to-surface missiles, right, there are several rolls, but each volley is adjudicated on its own, so there's no tracking of single missiles in that. Most ships, well, all ships, only do one volley, and usually there's only 2 or 3 ships launching. So again, each one of those really quick to do. So this is a print and play game, and we've got a Vassal module. Come to that if you don't know what Vassal is. So, print and play, cheap. I think the pledge is going to be $20. It's not going to cost you a lot. It will mean you get your game straight after the Kickstarter is finished. Well, when I say straight after, it takes 2 weeks or so for Kickstarter to get me the money. But as soon as that happens, the game will be with you. The game is ready to go. It's all sorted and done. Stretch goals, they'll take longer because I haven't done them yet. That's the whole point of doing the Kickstarter. There is also a Vassal module. Now, Vassal is a way of playing board games online. So all the counters and all the maps, or the map, is already preloaded onto Vassal. It means you don't have to print and play anything, and you can play immediately. You can play with somebody across the world. So even if you don't fancy printing it, and I get it, printing it will take a while. Then you don't need to. And that's it. That's a sort of overview of Northern Fleet. I've played it loads. It's a really good game, and it produces really interesting situations, and you get a feel for the history and what it might have actually been like. Okay, I'm the author, but it's brilliant. Okay, it's brilliant. I really enjoy it. It's an excellent game, and it's been such fun to do. And if you want to try it before you commit to the Kickstarter, but let's face it, the Kickstarter's only $20. It's not £20. We're doing pounds. It's only £20. But if you want to try it, all the rules, the maps, and such like, and the counters, plus the first 4 scenarios, that's the 3 introductory ones and the first big-ish one, they're all available on my Facebook group. There's the link. Click it, download it, come and say hi, and have fun.